Hello everyone. Welcome to Singapore Geospatial Festival 2021, an event that brings the international geospatial community together for co-located activities, promoting the use of location-based and mapping innovation. The event is organized by GeoWorks, Singapore Land Authority's Geospatial Industry Centre. Today, I'm excited to introduce the Innovating Maps panelists from FATOS, Next Billion, Open Geospatial Consortium, and UNL, with our moderator from Here Technologies. So they will be sharing more about the business of mapping and how maps are innovating for enterprise use cases. If you have any questions during the webinar, please leave them in the Q&A chat box and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. Thank you, and without further ado, I will now pass the session to TZ, our moderator. Over to you, TZ.
Hello, hi, good morning, and good day to everyone tuning in for this session of the part of the Singapore Geospatial Festival organized by GeoWorks. And just like Hui-san introduced, today we are going to be talking about innovating maps. And this topic is really exciting for me because I'm a firm believer of innovation for businesses. Now, today we have a fantastic group of panelists, and without further ado, I'd like to go around them and introduce them to or the audience, as well as have them tell everyone about a little bit about themselves, the companies they represent, and what they do. First, I'd like to welcome AJ from his Next Billion .ai. He's the co-founder. AJ, welcome to the panel.
Hi, thank you, TZ.
Hi. Would you like to share with the audience a little bit about what you do and what your company does before I move on to the other panelists?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ajay. I'm one of the co-founders of Next Billion AI. We are an enterprise geospatial mapping company. We help enterprises achieve location independence by helping them build their own maps.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, AJ, and welcome again. Next, I'd like to introduce Zender. He is the CEO of UNL. Hi, Zender.
Hi, TC. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Shall I start?
Yes, tell us a little bit what you do, what your company does.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank GeoWorks and GeoFest for having me, of course, and welcome everyone that tuned in. I'm Xander van der Heijden. I'm the founder and CEO of a startup called UNL in Singapore. 75% of the world is badly addressed and 4 billion people are without a verified and trusted address. This has been a challenge for the mapping industry for decades. UNL is solving this by building a micro-location infrastructure and a new generation mapping technology. We're digitizing physical locations and give them a unique, verifiable digital address. We can go up to a precision of 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. UNL does outdoor, indoor, and elevation, powering last mile delivery to smart city solutions. We give companies the ability to create their own virtual private maps by a push on a button. They can bring and manage their own data, tap into their workforce experience regarding local navigation to train their own UNL private router for optimal efficiency. The pandemic has shown us that there is a great need for an innovation like UNL. We're focusing on last mile logistics and mobility in Southeast Asia region. Thank you.
Thank you, Zender. Thanks for the introduction of yourself and your company. And next, I'd like to welcome Philip. He's Director of ASEAN Business of FATOS. Philip, please share with us, share with the audience what you do and what FATOS do. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, TZ. And then thanks, first of all, it's a great honor as a FATOS to be part of this special event. This is Philip Park, and then I'm the Director of Asia Pacific region of FATOS. FATOS is based in Korea. That we are born in the Korea. With a bunch of very high-profile engineers, which has first introduced a map business map application in Korea, and then we are now have a rooted in Singapore as Asia Pacific business entity. I personally lived in Singapore for more than 13 years. They used to work for Apple, for GeoWorks, and Samsung Electronics before. Then I think FATOS is kind of what I can say is FATOS is kind of integrated mobility on-demand service provider. So which means integrated means I think we have a base map as our own proprietary, and then we have all these the tracking, monitoring, analyzing, and then optimizing, even control I think functions that we can provide for each business parties who need some sort of these mobility solutions. So we are quite in a nutshell, we are the company to bring this mobility and map-based mobility services into the life for the business. Yeah, so this is what we are doing actually. Yeah, and then I'm in charge of a business in Asia Pacific. Yeah, based in Singapore. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Philip. Thank you for joining us today. And next, I'd like to introduce to you Scott. Scott, he is the Chief Standards Officer of the Open Geospatial Consortium. Scott, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, TZ. And thank you to GeoWorks and Singapore Land Authority for inviting us again this year to the Singapore Geospatial Festival. So again, Scott Simmons, I look after the standardization activities with the Open Geospatial Consortium. And in essence, what OGC, as we're better known, does is we try to make location information fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. We do that through the development of standards, as well as through applied research to ensure that those standards are relevant to the community, relevant to the practices you might have, and that they solve a bigger need to ensure that industry can support those standards such that we all can advance our work in collaboration. OGC is made up of more than 540 members worldwide, so we have members from across the globe equally participating in all of our activities, and we actually have more work in affiliation with GeoWorks in the coming weeks, and so I look forward to seeing a lot of people on this panel, hopefully in the coming days.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. So I forgot, I'm so excited, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm TZ, I head the Industry Analyst Relations for Asia Pacific for Here Technologies. And Here Technologies is a location data and technology platform company. All right, and we are available globally. So back to the topic in proper, which is so exciting. So talking about innovating maps, the business of mapping. Cartography is really has a very long history, and it has really powered. The maps have really powered a lot of discoveries, finding of new places as location-wise, etc. It really has historical significance. But right now, I want to start with saying that for many people, maps is mainly fundamentally about finding where you are, your location data, and helping you to get from a point A to point B, navigation, right? But of course, for us in the industry, we know it has moved far beyond that. There's a lot of innovation happening in terms of map. It's not just a simple map anymore, especially for enterprises who depends on the map and the location data and the intelligence to deliver value to their customers, right? So I want to start off by having each of you share what you see, what kind of innovations have you observed so far, and what are some of the innovations, the key ones that have struck you as, hey, this is really something new that I've not seen before, and we should have done this long time ago. So let's go around the panels and just share with us a few thoughts. It could be what you observe from your company. It could be something that you observe from other industries or that you know of. Just give us a glimpse of what are the innovations that are happening right now. So let's start with AJ.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting, good question, TZ. I think for us, what we are seeing is in the more enterprise mapping space, all these years, last decade or so, right? Maps were built mostly for consumers, like you and me, to go from point A to point B. But when the Uberization happened, like over a decade or so back, maps have become mainstream. If you look at the functions of mapping, you do batching, allocation, pricing, surge, everything, navigation, routing. But all this was structured very much for me and you. But when you suddenly add 1,000 by 1,000 matrix to all of this, that I think a lot of the current systems don't work. So I think a lot of the innovation is happening on how do you make it more efficient to get thousands of things in a microsecond to thousands of pieces, rather than a single person navigating or routing from point A to point B. A lot of what we are also seeing is that data has been democratized to a large extent. At one point, to build a map, you have to go survey, expensive. You have to spend a lot of money to build a map. And that is why even today in the world, there are only 4 large mapping players, because they've invested over the last. But currently, we don't see the need for it anymore. It's more about every company has enough data to have their own map. I think that's another trend we're seeing more and more. Every enterprise also has their own needs. Like I drive a truck, or I may drive a scooter, or I may drive a car. So the mode of transportation is completely different from what you're doing. So these are a bunch of innovations that we're seeing either being built in-house by companies, or relying on companies like ours or the many who are on the panel today to help them sort of do it to gain efficiency. Anything location is seeing a lot of efficiency gains on the bottom line. That was never even thought of it as sort of something that they would look. They just think, okay, there is some map, I would just use this map. But they never thought of map as an efficiency gain in a business metric. That is something also that we are seeing. So a couple of things are exciting currently.
Okay, fantastic. That's a good overview of what's happening here. And perhaps I'd like to turn to Philip. What are you seeing? Do you see any kind of what kind of innovations are you seeing, especially in our region, like Southeast Asia, where you're active in?
Okay. So first of all, I really agree on the AJ that everything is right now is more mission critical. So everything is integrated to workflow, right? So let's say for me, I want to bring some sort of let's say on demand, right? What is on demand? So previously, as TJ you said, previous map is, let's say, travelers, they just use a map. When we go to some new places, we just using as a very simple navigator, the origin, place, location to the destination, there's a routing. So that is as perceived, let's say, it's a map solution. But nowadays, on demand means for us to see the on demand is, let's say, we have a multiple stakeholders like enterprises, right? And even for users, even the consumer market, they are not simple. It is actually, let's say, for example, passenger and drivers, right? Previously, we just only use the drivers as a driver map, right? But the consumer, they just use a map as for routing. But what if those two are combined as one solution to optimize, let's say, by on demand, demand from the multiple stakeholders, multiple users, drivers, and then passenger, they have to match. Let's say based on the destination and origin nearby location, then they can just matching. They can just meet up, and then they can just go to the journey together, right? So all these are very complex demand now. How do we service? How do we cater all this demand with a very well established solution which we can use in our daily life? There is a key thing in I think that what is now happening in the world we are looking right now. So for us in Southeast Asia, same thing happened. But Singapore is more about social, what you are perceiving is more about the service sector, the social sector, they're building up to understand more about the community members, how do they, what is kind of improvement needed for them, etc. Previously, it's all sitting in the database, Excel file, CRM, but community is living in the real world, so they are located, and then we have to spot the locate. So it's a bit merging into it's aligned with what AJ said. It's merging into the map as how do we help the community to build up to understand more about the community. That is what we're seeing in Singapore. What is happening in the other major Southeast Asian countries? Infrastructure is problem, right? The traffic signals, and then information is not as detailed as reality, and then sometimes it's very wrong information. So how do they the breakthrough, even regardless of this inferior infrastructure, using digital map, using mobile phone? How do we overcome these challenges? There is more nearby countries. I think the trend is one we are seeing using the digital map. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating, and I think you raised a lot of the issues we will address in a bit. There's a lot of things that are coming out right now. It's really exciting. So let's turn over to Xander. What do you see? What kind of innovations really struck you so far?
So I agree with AJ and Philip, so I won't repeat what they are saying. But what I've seen in general in the mapping industry regarding innovation was mainly focused around data, content, and the visualization regarding the data, 3D, high definition maps. But there is a whole wave of innovation coming from the mapping industry in the coming years. Both from large tech as new players entering the market. There are two new players here in this call, Next Billion and UNL. So we have to compete with the large tech in that perspective, but we foresee a lot of chances. But it's more interesting to look at what is driving the acceleration of innovation now. I believe that the rise of new technology like autonomous cars, connected cars, drones, robotics, 5Gs, but also the pandemic impact and climate are driving innovation in the geospace. Mapping is becoming more and more key to all of these technology to be successful. Micro and hyperlocal data are crucial for these tech to work properly. So it's exciting times for the mapping and geospatial industry, as this is all related to us, and we play a crucial role in the evolution of these technologies.
And over to Scott, what have you seen? Can you share with us in terms of innovation?
Absolutely, and it's wonderful because Ajay, Philip, and Xander each touched upon some of the elements that have a common relationship, and maybe as Philip described, the number of different stakeholders we have for map data mean that the underlying fundamental map content is being repurposed for so many different use cases with the same original content. And the content providers and the people that are building the maps, the people that are distributing the maps, understand that all of these users have different use cases, but have commonalities about how they might use those data. And as much as can be built common at the bottom level is happening now, and it's really impressive. And so Xander mentioned the use of autonomous vehicles. And so the same map content that's available as a digital service inside an autonomous vehicle to help it understand its place in the world and then make its own micro calculations against other vehicles is the same content that we might use to visualize the path we're going to walk to the park, or navigate like the map behind my head, if you know, paper map. The visual aspects of that map were really, really important. The underlying content of that map that gave you that visualization has so many other purposes. And what I'm just so impressed by is that the entire community is taking new data, new ways of updating data, and creating this fundamental base map ecosystem that's applicable across all different types of use cases. And we're just going to see this get more and more powerful as we start looking at microlocation and we start looking at issues like 5G navigation outdoors and indoor and all of these other issues where the content becomes king, as Bill Gates said years ago. And the content is the king that enables all of our business.
Fantastic. So what I hear is that there are efficiency gains that can be derived from all these innovations for the businesses. There are also real life problems that we're trying to solve, such as the infrastructure problem that Philip mentioned, and how about dealing with wrong info from maps. And then Xander was talking about a lot of the visualization and the other industries that driving the innovation. So these are all coming together. So what I hear is that technology is taking on a very key role. The availability of these technologies to power these innovations is taking on a key role in the business of mapping. So do you see that this kind of innovations is happening more frequently? How is the frequency? So my question is the frequency of the innovation happening more frequently at a small magnitude? That means we are looking at small innovations, but more frequently. Or are we looking at big innovation, but less frequently? Or is it just a mix? There's no pattern at anywhere. Innovation can come from any corner, given the access of the technology we can access right now for most people and most businesses. Would Scott want to take a stab at this? Because I know you're a proponent of accessibility of the data.
Yeah, and I do think the technology is so rapidly advancing, and the capabilities we're getting from this are perhaps moving faster than any of us ever anticipated. And it's not just that we are creating data that's relevant to all of our users. It's that we in the community are also developing those applications against the data that are completely novel. And many of us 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, didn't call a vehicle to come pick us up and take us to another part of town without having a map with a map interface. This is really actually brand new for the vast majority of us. It's not that long. I mean, we see innovative uses of maps perhaps even outpacing as fast as we can develop clever content. And I think that's a real hurdle we're going to have coming up in the future, and maybe something we can talk a little bit later today, is how we as users are and citizens are all becoming experts faster than the technology perhaps can provide us the expertise we need.
Okay, what's your thought, Philip? Like, has technology enable the innovations such as become more frequent, more easily accessible?
Yeah. So maybe the definition of innovation from our side is innovation is our life. So it's like an Apple. Let's say the Steve Jobs bring the innovation because it's not about the technology. It's about how you use the technology as a part of our life, right? So I think based on the definition of that innovation, yes, technology give us more flexibility, more accessibility, more feasibility to our use of the technology, and then maybe that lead to some sort of hybrid trend that we will face more and more frequent small magnetic innovation, but maybe there must be some breakthrough innovations in a certain point of time, right? But I think our life is all really filled up by all these small little innovations, step by step, one by one, with different use cases, different contents, contexts. The more we deal with the data and then the technology, we have more use cases. Then that is we see as innovation. So more and more frequent. That is what we see.
Okay, and talking about innovation and where is it coming from, I think AJ and Xander will be able to provide a very interesting perspective. So again, related question is, are we seeing these innovations coming more from the big guys, the big players, or are we looking at innovation coming from startups and people with new ideas? And to put in context, innovation here doesn't mean making something completely new. It's not necessarily the case. It could be doing things better, doing things differently, but from taking it the solving the problem from different approach. So AJ, your take. Of course, with your company, you are definitely one of the people who are trying to innovate in this space. Are you seeing that more and more companies like yourself are coming up in this map making space to innovate, or is it more driven by the big players?
So I think it's a very interesting question. I feel that in this space, especially on the mapping and spatial front, a lot of innovation over the last decade has happened in the route optimization and supply chain visibility space. Like a lot of it, you've seen a decade long of companies that have come and they've helped companies visualize the chain. But what has still happened is the underlying data was still being consumed by the existing players. So which if your data is not good, the algorithm is just as good as what the data is feeding into it. So a lot of the innovation that at least we are seeing right now is happening on how do you fundamentally change the architecture of what you're consuming, not just consume what is available, but how do you change it, how do you play with it, how do you how do you have your own private map? As an example, how do I restrict Esplanade area during Formula One during this 3 days just for my company, not the world, but how do I make sure distance, direction, route, ETA is impacted by just the closures for Formula One? So the problem statements are becoming extremely hyperlocal. And I think the larger companies are not architected to solve these problems. They are just, I mean, like you've written code for 15 years, you just can't change it, overnight to cater. So I think that's one part of it that's heavily getting innovated. Second part of it is, of course, how do I consume all of this data? See, a lot of data is abundantly available, but how do you package it for enterprise? So a lot of it is also packaging companies. A lot of it is available open source. Like government of Singapore, example, puts out a lot of data. But how do you mix that with your data, with open data, with maybe closed data? How do you package all of this and make it useful for your business? I think is the other innovation that's coming up over the next decade. So packaging and consumption, I think, are the two key levers of innovation that at least we are seeing that have already begun, but we'll see rapid acceleration with the development of software across the world and with the lockdowns and how people are consuming maps. I feel it's going to accelerate very rapidly next 5 years.
Okay, great, fantastic. And Xander, over to you. So let me recap the question. So has technology make it easier for the new players to come up with innovations, or is it still mainly driven by the big players?
It's a good question, and I agree with AJ. There is another dimension to it, and it's, of course, all about what is innovation. Is it incremental? Is it disruptive? And I think what I already shared with the wave of new technology coming, I think the traditional legacy mapping infrastructure doesn't give enough to support these technologies. So it needs to be a whole new way of thinking about mapping and digitizing the physical world. And that said, I think you will see more challengers of the big tech companies. There are not a lot of mapping providers, global mapping providers. I can name them. So there is enough space for newcomers and new players to innovate and help these tech giants to reinvent mapping as such. But there are more challenges to that if you take into account, and everyone is talking about data. I've been hearing this from everyone. Data is key. That comes with also another challenge, privacy and ownership of that data. How are you dealing with that? It's becoming a global issue. And with that means that also the big tech giants need to have a different view on their whole tech stack. How are they supporting this data privacy and this data ownership? And how can you reward end users to contribute data? Point of interest data is one of the biggest challenges of the mapping industry. How can you maintain quality data and provide this data and exchange this data across industry? There is a lot of data already there, but it's not available to the ecosystem. So also what you see in the coming years are data exchanges, local, hyperlocal data exchanges that facilitate crossover data exchange. These are innovations that are coming to support the whole ecosystem. So yeah, it's exciting times again. We're very excited. We're part of that.
Yeah. And people outside of the industry that I speak to thought mapping was boring. No way. It's so exciting nowadays. So many things to talk about. And Scott, I'd like you to also hear your views on this question. But could you address it from the your anger, which I know that you have a acronym that's trying to make the geospatial information and services fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So I thought that was a very interesting angle to look at it, and I think the audience would like to hear your take. So the question here is, with all the innovations, whether from big tech players or the smaller new startup companies, they're all doing different things, and I'm not sure whether they're all interoperable. They all talk to each other. The data, which Zender mentioned, is really important. It sounds like mapping is like a data problem, right? So your take, is it accessible for businesses, not just in terms of the technology, not also because cost-wise? Is it cost accessible that way?
Yeah, and I'm lucky in my job that I get to work with people from the entire spectrum, from the giant big companies that are doing amazing research and creating great capabilities, as well as all these entrepreneurial startups that are doing just technologies and solving problems that maybe we didn't even know we needed to solve. And so it's absolutely fantastic to see the spread of the technology. We are also lucky that the people that participate in OGC and that participate in forums such as this want to learn from each other and try to build value with each other. And ideally, we can have an environment where we have some of the just absolutely massive infrastructures that are out there and that we're all using, accepting of new technology, new content, new ways of operating with the information, and accepting that information as being valuable, while at the same time enabling those businesses to work. It is always a challenge. There are commercial drivers that, of course, keep everyone in their specific swim lanes, if you will, to try to keep the business, obviously just a little bit selfish. But there is so much cooperation, and I think everyone does realize that if the information is findable, those that provide the best, most relevant, most connected information are going to win in the marketplace. So let's set that base foundation, make sure everyone can find and access the information, and let the best players thrive in that environment. And we're building that, I think, globally in the geospatial community.
Okay, so fantastic. We have a lot of thoughts here so far. It's been a full jam pack of content and ideas and thoughts. But I'll take a pause and just to remind the audience that if you have any questions you'd like us, the panelists, to address, please use the Q&A box that you find in the platform, and we address them towards the end of the panel. So going back to the discussion topic, now this is a lot of it. Just now we're talking about data. I think we're talking about the map data, the content data, and I think one interesting thing that I observed is that I read some recently that there is a new kind of so-called perhaps innovative map data, such as it's called a noise map. You know, the sounds that we don't really want to hear, those are noise. And then in Australia, there's a company that creates a noise map so that you can know the road noise, the railway noise, and the aircraft noise in around every street in Australia before you even purchase a property, whether you are a consumer or maybe you're enterprise, you're trying to locate an office or something. So I thought that was really interesting. No one had probably thought of it before, or it's just me, I didn't know about it. But I guess this is only possible if the infrastructure of the mapping that they create this map has different application layers, right? We're talking about new layer of the map. So I want to turn to Philip, and why don't you share with the audience what are the wonderful things that we can do with applications right now with maps?
Sorry, I just wrongly placed my cursor for the button.
No problem.
So I think it's quite. I mean, pleased to know about that noise map actually in Australia, right? So yes, I think it's all for me. Is all for maybe it's a different layer, but anyway, it's about the new idea of collecting how you want to collect the data and which type of data you want to collect, right? At the end of the day, actually, it's all sensors, and you cannot avoid from real world. Means you have a sensor to detect all this data or information. Let's say you use sound sensor. You use previously we use some very simple OBD, but let's say we have some sort of a project in Korea that working with some truck company, that this company is moving hazardous material, right? Then what is special? Because of the character of this material is hazardous, we have to deroute. I mean, you have to have a special route for this truck. Then how do you? Then you have to have information of all these different types of height, corners. I mean, the width of the road. Maybe it's a bit a prelude to the autonomous vehicle, but to do that, we need more sensories, more sensors to collect data, different types of sensories, so that you can tweak. Or you can cater for the really creative idea of a mapping or another layer. So this is actually is a bit aligned with the previous question. More technologies actually is a pros and cons. Actually, I mean, because you have to combine with the hardware, devices, sensories, because new idea requires new technologies, and then we have tons of different technology in the market. So how do you deal with it? Then I think there is a challenge for the company, small company, or whether it's a big company. There are multiple choices of technology to create new layer or new application. Can you do it? Can you really are capable, or you have a capacity to deal with all these very horizontal multiple technologies as a one single solution? So there is a real challenge for nowadays actually. So yes, for mapping we are seeing this actually more detection, more collecting very different types of information, etc. And we are looking at it actually. Yeah. So I think map is now becomes our once again our life, and then our life is filled up with a lot of sensories, a lot of sound, music, visions, and then location, height, depth, right? And then 3D is one of it as well. So that is what I see. Yes, we will see more and more about that. And then I think then pros and cons. It's a bit challenges to realize. So there's a reason we need more partnership with different parties. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And I'd like to turn to the topic about the Southeast Asia in the region. So because in the region is so diverse, right? I think AJ alluded to some of the issues we are facing: underdeveloped infrastructure, the rise of mega cities, and like ever-changing complex addresses. Like for some places in Japan, even with the address, you can't find it. You have to know the roads, right? And chain roads, yeah, like Singapore roads changes, buildings get demolished, etc. how do enterprises actually deal with this kind of changes in the map data, because the changes happening so rapidly? Is this a business problem that needs to be solved, and how can it be solved with the maps technology and applications that we have nowadays? AJ, would you like to share your thoughts?
So unfortunately, it's not being solved because it's currently not solved, right? That's also because of the legacy sort of systems that have been built over the last decade or so. So as I said, classic examples. I was working at Grab for a long time, and we could not open close roads as we pleased because it was just impossible. And at our scale, we were doing a huge amount of rides every day, and we were extremely stuck with sort of the legacy mapping providers. And that's happening with anyone. Talk to any enterprise in the world today, and they will say we are just unable to do certain things. And that's the reason why we set up Next Billion, because you can do it now. So you can open close roads as you want. You can open shut time based, day based restrictions, and in your own stack. You don't have to, how do I say, trouble anyone else, or as a company you don't have to feel like, oh, if I close this road it's going to be closed for everyone else. No, it's just going to be closed for you. Just as an example, same way addresses the extremely big problem. We have not even scratched the surface of addresses in the world. We are also beginning to learn one thing, that there's no need to solve everything at a global scale, because you can't. It's all hyper local scale. If you are doing business in Jakarta, just have the best map for Jakarta. You don't have to cater to even every other city outside of your service area, right? So essentially, I feel we used to always look at mapping as a global problem. We look at it as a hyper local problem. Literally, just have the best map for where you're doing business. You don't have to worry about what's going on. Enterprises are understanding it slowly. They always thought, hey, I need country scale maps, but you're like, no, why do you need a country scale map? You just need your city, your locality scale map, and in that you need to have layers that are extremely conflated, precise, good, what you can use for your business. So I feel that is the biggest challenge most of us are addressing. It has not been addressed or solved, unfortunately. So but it will get addressed or solved in the next decade or so, because the system, software, people, components are slowly building up these capabilities.
Okay, and Xander, what are do you have any thoughts to share on this?
Yes, absolutely. I disagree with AJ partly, as it's a global problem for partly, and especially if you're considering addressing and the digital infrastructure, as supply chains are not locally but they're globally. So you need to have an infrastructure that everyone can connect with and interconnect with to make supply chains transparent. But I agree with content-wise, data-wise, that it's a local challenge. If you're talking about Jakarta and we have some projects in Jakarta, then you need to look at it from a local, hyper local perspective, and look at all the data sources that you can bring into your map, so to provide the best services regarding logistics, mobility. So I partly agree and disagree. So addressing and especially in Southeast Asia, India, Africa, where there are no addressing systems available and everything is landmark driven and descriptive. That's a challenge already for decades, and that's something we are solving with the UNL, creating a cell structure and creating a semantic ontology and knowledge graph, creating relationships between these landmarks and make it searchable. You can translate these descriptive text into geocodes, into GeoDs, as we call them, and pinpoint exact addresses. So there's innovation on its way to solve this addressing problem. But very interesting domain, and absolutely necessary, especially in Southeast Asia, as everyone is struggling, as AJ said. This is a need that is very urgent, especially during the pandemic and the explosive growth of e-commerce. There's a need for this digital infrastructure and the ability to bring your own data, to create your own map, to tap into your workforce, to validate these point of interest data and addresses, to optimize your business and efficiency in your fulfillment. So absolutely.
Okay, and Philip, do you have anything to add on this topic?
Yes, I think I all agree with Zender and then AJ, 100%. And then Southeast Asia, what we are seeing is actually we've been here to an actual, we are engaging with the actual projects actually. So what we really see as a other, I'm not talking about the Singapore, I'm talking about the major Southeast Asia countries. I think what we're seeing is really the challenge of infrastructure. Then see as let's say if you just compare with the computer and let's say internet, web, I think now they skip to the mobile. Similarly, map can, I think what we are seeing is whether it's a digital map can overhaul the challenge of physical infrastructure and the build up the more digitized solution through this digital map. That is what we are seeing actually in Southeast Asia. I think it takes time until we really build up really very solid infrastructure, all the sensories and the cameras, and then the internet, very detailed map. Very difficult, actually takes up so long time. But how do we can shorten or even skip that stage using the digital map, using the public open ecosystem? I think that is a key project. And then there is a reason I think the big giant company can facilitate all this actually with a small little localized partners, and then big companies providing some sort of facilitating this kind of a local project. I think then I think that is key agenda that we are seeing in the Southeast Asia. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. And Scott, interesting angle for you to take as well. So AJ was talking about you hyper local. You just need to know, let's say your business, you just need to know your area of operation, let's say Jakarta, very well. You create your own map, private map, etc. Now here comes an issue. Like the Zender was talking about addresses, right? Different types of addresses. Here comes a potential issue that I see, and probably you would agree, is that now one company in Jakarta create this really fantastic map, well, for their own use. What about the rest? Are they able to somehow use that as well, or is it going to be a proprietary IP to that company? And it means that every other enterprise who wants to operate in Jakarta will have to create their own map and reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So that's an interesting tussle between what's really the IP of the company in relation to the maps they create, and what's really for the greater good, so to speak. Your take on this, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, this reflects back on the good old days of paper maps, when for any particular city, you had 5 different providers of paper maps for that city, and whoever had the best scheme to describe what streets were really where they were and had them the most accurate won the business. And we all, and long ago, I'm old, right? We had map books that we would drive through our city and try to find where we were going, and it was a very competitive landscape. We don't quite have that same luxury we once did, and that the turn of information change that our users expect is much faster than it once was. And it was perfectly acceptable to one time to say that a new street was developed and 3 years later it showed up on a map, because everyone was using a paper map. And if you needed to know where it was, you would figure it out. Otherwise, who cares? The consumer no longer has that patience. We don't have businesses that can rely on that. One guy just happens to know where to go. And so we're almost forced to share to some degree. And Ajay and Xander both commented on that level of expertise of understanding what the end user needs from the data, needs to drive how we develop and how we update. And addressing schemes are the biggest nightmare in the world, because you have cultural influences that are not even something we can equate to simple mathematics. We cannot take a Japanese addressing scheme and a Puerto Rican addressing scheme, and you will never find a commonality. There's no cultural, nor is there any map-based concept that's going to link those. And so we have to work in this environment of understanding our differences, but also understanding those hyper-local things that are really, really important need to at least be encoded and described in a way that others can apply that knowledge elsewhere. And that's just, I think, a big part of what I like to work with, is trying to ensure that we can impart the right kind of knowledge and spread that expertise that's relevant, and understand some things just don't translate.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So I'd like to take a quick look at the Q&A box, and we do have some questions coming in. So why don't we take a look at the questions that came in, and let's see if we can address them. So there's a question from Xiao Yong. And do you see sorry, there's a question for question to all the panelists. How important is geometrical precision in the future maps? To what precision level is desired, or is it depends on the use, and where's logic demanding coming from? It's a fantastic question. So I'm opening up to anyone in the panel. Please feel free to take it on.
Sure, I want to start there. As we are addressing this, we go up to 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. And yes, it's based on user cases. And give an extreme example, drone delivery, where GPS is 20 to 50 meters off. You can't use GPS to land a drone. You need to go specific, and you need to have a solution where it can land on a specific area, and it needs to be accurate. And in many cases where you have IoT, and the IoT beacons, sensors, they also need to have an address. You need to interact with that physical location where the sensor creates data, and you need to give context to that data. And to give context, you need to understand where it comes from, and which physical location, in what environment, and what are the semantics around that data. And that's where you need accurate digital addresses of physical locations to interact with. So a good question. That's my answer.
Okay. How about the Scott, Philip, or AJ? Any thoughts on this? How precise do future maps needs to be, or does it depend on the specific use cases?
No, I completely agree with Xander. It's actually very, very use case specific currently. As you said, GPS accuracy is wayward at times, like when you're in large cities and can even go up to 300 meters or so. You can see your pin in the sea sometimes. So that being said, for a specific use case, a 3D map plus a 1 centimeter precision is extremely important. But let's say you're doing a cross-country trip with trucks, I don't think you require that level of precision because the routing really does not need so. So it's completely case dependent. It's also, as we move to a smarter city in the world, I think it's important for you to have these precise map, especially for governments. It's because you want your city to be smart, and when you want your city to be smart, you want centimeter level accuracy. And there are many use cases you can add to it. Like I know a company in India that does like tax planning based on where you stay, based on residency. That's because you're in a 3D spectrum, in an apartment, X number of people owe taxes still. So there are so many ancillary use cases that you can produce with centimeter grade accuracy. But again, if you're in the trucking, logistics sort of business, I think you can take one step above and say, I want some meter level accuracy. So it's completely use case dependent. It's an excellent question. It's also how much money do people have to spend to get to that accuracy. It's all a factor in of how much capital you can get there. So I feel if there's capital, of course, we can all have centimeter grade accuracy across the world, but it's a very, 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 very difficult problem to solve.
And I might add, there's an interesting consideration is what's most important, absolute accuracy or relative accuracy. And so accurately positioning yourself within 3 millimeters on the globe has certain use cases that get to be a bit complicated, but relative accuracy at 3 millimeters is utterly critical with respect to autonomous vehicles or warehouse systems or port facilities. And all of those, that relative accuracy is critically important. We have to have the infrastructure to understand that. And once you have your relative accuracy tied down, we can start expanding back to this absolute. And so I think we're going to see something of a transition in time with already machinery, precision digging of trenches and foundations is already done at sub-millimeter accuracy with the heavy equipment on a relative scale. That does become important absolutely with time and as infrastructure becomes more precise. So it's I think we see an evolution. I recently talked to the head of the GPS program for the United States, and they're already planning for when is the 5 millimeter demand going to come, and it's 7 years from now at most.
Wow, okay, that's really good, useful insight to know. And any thoughts on the question, Philip? How precise do future maps needs to be?
No, I more than agree with everybody. Actually, this is really use cases. It definitely, but as precise as possible is a good thing. But whether your infrastructure has enough capacity to, process enough time. And then your service time is not impacted, and then you have enough budget. That depends, right? So course, I'm quite aligned with everybody. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And let's take the next question. We have another question. So from, let's see, Dick Hoy from Dick Hoy. He has a question. He or she has a question on this. Yeah, there you go. The question. Thank you. Oh, potential usage or increasing demand for 3D map content selling and buying via marketplaces. Exchange of data. Yeah,
Yes.
this is really interesting. So
I'm happy
go
to
ahead.
jump in because I love
Yeah.
all things 3D. I go crazy for all 3D data. And actually, this is great that we're doing this at the Singapore GeoFest because Southeast Asia and East Asia in general is the case locality for why 3D data can be so valuable. You cannot develop real estate without understanding the view shed of your real estate. You cannot buy a flat in a high-rise building without understanding what you can and cannot see. And the three-dimensional data necessary to enable that financial transaction is so easy to justify cost-wise. 3D cadastre, people that own property in vertical space, it's really easy to justify. It gets harder and harder as we leave these highly urbanized developments. But what we're seeing is a community evolving, and I'll give an example right now. There's something known as the OpenAR Cloud. And the OpenAR Cloud is an intent to try to develop a cloud infrastructure and marketplace for augmented reality content, typically 3D content, with the understanding that some should be common and freely available, and some should be commercial and via marketplace. And so the augmented reality community really sees a value in this hybrid model of content and buying and selling data in a AR marketplace. I think that's directly translatable to all other things we do in spatial.
Fantastic. I can relate to that. It's really hard to imagine how let's say you're looking for a property unit for office or something. How does it relate to the other buildings, the height, or etc. I can relate to that. I think most of us can. So, anyone else who would like to comment on the question?
Yeah, sure. I fully agree with Scott. 3D high definition will become a crucial part of mapping. And I see also a crossover between gaming and the mapping geospatial industry, as they have been already working in this domain for decades. And you see also the game engine developers, OEMs, working together with the big mapping companies in creating new render engines for the visualization of mapping data. So it's an interesting evolution happening, and this will only be accelerated in the coming years. And absolutely, that the gaming industry and the 3D designers will sell their content to the mapping industry.
So for me is some different aspect. For 3D modeling, yes, definitely very interesting. But I think for the vertical and then indoor location, locating, I think for me is a kind of a key thing. If you cannot locate yourself in the indoor, or at least you have any kind of technology to combine your location with the 3D modeling indoor, I think that is key element for 3D modeling, because in the road outside, I think we have certain level of technology already to shape up. But 3D for me is more about indoor. How do we really make it possible in the indoor location, navigation, routing, etc. Yeah. Then I think if it's gelled with 3D, I think might be very breakthrough. That is what I think.
Indoor is really tough, because I was speaking to someone from Grab, and he said one of the issues is that the people who want to buy food, the people they order food from, they need to locate the shops. And indoor, sometimes the mall configuration, the shops change locations, etc. It's not so easy. And indoor is a good problem to solve, really.
Yes.
Any thoughts on this, AJ? 3D maps.
Yeah, I think so. We did a bunch of work in this area, and it's very tough. I'm realizing that the costs involved in creating the map more than actually consuming it and then maintaining it on top, right? So it's especially when you go indoor, the things positioning yourself with existing technology is very difficult. Not creating the map, but how do you position yourself relative to a space and then sort of navigate inside that is the problem to solve. Not creating the map. Creating the map is relatively pretty easy, but your phone is not enough for you to position yourself in the inside. And this is just not inside a mall. It's inside an airport, inside any closed space. That becomes the tougher problem. So either till then you have to go into Bluetooths and understanding that sort of, and that becomes a very, very heavyweight system to do. We did a full mall mapping in our past, and where we actually spent 5 days mapping 5 floors and putting all sorts of infrastructure in place, and then the ROI was just not worth it. So some of these things are the considerations. I think the technology and hardware has to evolve, not the software. That's happening with 5G coming in. The chipsets are improving dramatically from what we understand, and they can position you relative to any space. And when that comes, I think the whole thing is going to get more commoditized. So I feel it is there, but still not there.
Okay, great. And we have one more really interesting question. So it's from Raymond Ma. How do you think 360 images can be used to innovate the mapping industry? I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I can go first. We consume a lot of it, thanks to amazing companies like Mapillary and CartaView, OpenStreetCam, lots of available sources of this imagery crowdsourced across the world. So it can be used for a bazillion things, for especially in creating map data, right from street sign detections to understanding precision of stores, lat longs, understanding even heights of buildings. If you have 360 degrees, actually, a lot can be accomplished. I feel that already a couple of companies are doing a brilliant job of putting a lot of this onto open source so people can consume and again package it and make it usable. We are still a long way off. It's amazing in some very developed countries, not so amazing in the still developing countries. I think our region, especially Southeast Asia, requires a lot more of these, especially people collecting, updating, but also keeping privacy in concern. Imagery is always great, but we've seen consistent issues of privacy, people's faces, at times phone screens, number plates, many personal information being exposed. So as much as it is amazing to have this, I think it's very, very important for us to also make sure that we are adhering to privacy. I'm sure other people have their own this thing, but this is my opinion on 360.
Anyone else has an opinion to want to share? No? Okay, no. Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Go
I'm
on.
happy to comment. I mean, I'm seeing a lot more use of the imagery as well. And as Ajay noted, particularly with crowdsourced information or collections over linear areas where people are walking with these cameras and you can do very quick photogrammetry. I saw some excellent examples in Delhi, in fact, of some really beautiful 3D modeling from 360 imagery. I expect we're going to see a lot more of this, particularly for first responders and emergency responders, and developing relatively low sophistication but visually accurate three-dimensional interior models of spaces for first responders. I mean, the technology's there. It's just a matter of getting the content and having the wherewithal to put it someplace where people can use it.
All right, fantastic. So coming to the top of the hour, I just have one last question for all the panelists. So we've talked about a lot today. It's really jam-packed with ideas, contents, and insights shared by every one of you. Thank you so much. Now, I'd like to go around everyone, and would you like to share one or two key takeaways with our audience from today's session? So perhaps I can start with Scott, because it's just let's start with Scott.
All right, I'll make it really quick. I see 45 people on this session right now. I'm guessing 44 of you at least are geospatial experts. What you need to remember is the vast majority of your users these days are not geospatial experts. COVID has proven that. We're all geospatial analysts because we know how to read a map that shows where we've got diseases. Remember, those other users are the most important ones now.
Fantastic. Next, Philip.
Yes, thanks, TJ. And then really, once again, we are honored for being part of this event. I think for us, I want to say is map is not boring thing. Actually, map is part of life. So everything what we bring to the business, whether it's consumer, I think it should be something impactful, save the cost, should be more efficient, etc. So it is now already being part of our life, and then everybody wants to just take it as, bring to life. So we hope to contribute it.
Fantastic. And
In
Zender?
Singapore and Southeast.
Yes, thank you for having me, of course. With the further digitization and the rise of the metaverse, that was already discussed also, creating the digital twin of the world. Mapping will play a key role in connecting the physical with the digital world. I think geotechnology will have its place in this new metaverse where everyone is talking about.
And AJ, thank you, Zender.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. I think for us in our world, we call maps the new search. That's the sort of thing we have as a vision in our company. We used to go to Google to search for things. Now, eventually, you will go to a map because it's all information that is sort of digitized somewhere, and you will not go search on an empty box, but you look through more visually what you want to see. So we see maps evolving to be more like a search than going back in time. So it's going to be a very interesting decade, I think, for the most of us. And yeah, very excited to be here with 40 plus amazing people. Thank you so much for hearing to us.
Thank you, all the panelists. And I think maps for me, I never realized maps is so important. And now that I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak, in the industry, this is really exciting. And I totally agree with what all you have shared. Thank you so much for the audience for attending this seminar webinar. And thank you for Scott, Philip, Zender, and AJ for attending this. And thank you, GeoWorks, for having us here. This is TZ. I've been grateful to be your moderator. Thank you, and see you again next time.
See you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.
How do we go out?